Imagine in Nigeria, where healthcare centers in rural towns never run out of oxygen, where classrooms are equipped not just with chalkboards, but with broadband, where potholes on federal roads are filled not by bureaucratic promises, but by seamless partnerships. In Nigeria, public hospitals are powered by solar panels installed by private energy firms. Boreholes are drilled by corporations not as a charity, but as a strategic move, aligning social impact with national development. It's not fiction. It is what happens when corporate social responsibility meets well-structured public-private partnerships. In this landscape, government isn't the sole driver of change. It becomes the enabler. Private sector players aren't just profit-driven, they are co-creators of progress, and the citizen, no longer left behind, but finally at the center of it all. This is the promise of CSR and PPPs done right. Efficient public services, sustainable impact, and shared value for all. In this episode of the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation podcast, we explore how the fusion of private sector innovation and public sector vision is rewriting the story of development, from reactive charity to strategic national building. Stay with us.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation podcast, where we bring you bold conversations on building a public sector that truly delivers for citizens. I'm your host today, Buki Akinshemoyin, Director of Funding and Partnerships at the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation. At the Foundation, we believe that sustainable development cannot be achieved in silos. It hinges on partnerships. Over the years, we have seen how the right collaborations between the government and the private sector can solve some of our most persistent challenges, from capacity building to digital infrastructure, healthcare to civil service reform. Today, we're zooming in on a powerful question. What happens when corporate social responsibility goes beyond ad hoc, charity-focused philanthropy by incorporating elements of public-private partnerships for truly strategic, scalable, and impactful collaborations for society? What would it take to make the CSR and PPP models work, not just in theory, but in practice? What roles should governments play to attract and retain meaningful private sector engagements? And how do we ensure that these partnerships deliver not just value for money, but value for the people? Joining me today are two leaders with deep experience in driving impact through these first models. And allow me a few minutes just to introduce them. First is Odunayo Sanya, the Executive Director of MTN Nigeria Foundation. MTN has been a key player in Nigeria's digital transformation and a pioneer in socially impactful CSR initiatives. Odunayo Sanya's career spans the education, financial services, telecommunications, and development and social impact sectors in Nigeria. She currently serves as the Executive Director of the MTN Nigeria Foundation, leading the team to deliver strategic initiatives in alignment with Sustainable Development Goals, Nigeria's national priorities, and MTN Nigeria's corporate social investment objectives. Odunayo joined MTN Nigeria in 2005. She is an alumna of the Lagos Business School and the Institute of Management Development Switzerland. She has attended executive training at the Harvard Business School, INSEAD, Cornell University, and Imperial College London. Odunayo is also an author, and her book, The Alphabets of Leadership for Young Minds, is listed in the United States Library Congress. Thank you for joining us today, Odunayo.
Thank you very much, Buki, for having me, and thank you to the entire AIG Foundation team. Thank you.
Also with us today is Kelvin Uwaibi, Founding Managing Director of the Edo State Investment Promotion Office, ESIPO. Kelvin has been at the forefront of facilitating PPPs that align with the state development agenda, unlocking opportunities across sectors. Kelvin Uwaibi is a seasoned public-private partnership architect, an investment strategist with over 2 decades of experience driving institutional reforms and structured private sector engagements. As the founding managing director of the Edo State Investment Promotion Office, ESIPO, he led the passage of the state's landmark PPP law and a transparent subnational PPP framework that now serves as a national model for project financing and accountability. Beyond PPP structuring, Kelvin has championed corporate social responsibility through MSME-led economic empowerment and digital transformation initiatives, demonstrating a commitment to inclusive growth that aligns with private investments and sustainable community development. Kelvin is an alumnus of the Harvard Kennedy School's Executive Program and also an alumnus of the AIG Public Leaders Program, which is run in conjunction with the Blavatnik School of Government, University of Oxford, and is a fellow of the Africa Leadership University's Public Sector Leaders Fellowship. Great to have you here, Kelvin.
Thank you, Buki, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's begin by understanding the landscape. CSR initiatives in Nigeria often focus on philanthropy, schools built, medical missions deployed. Meanwhile, PPPs tackle large-scale infrastructure. But what if we fuse these models by incorporating the deliberate, strategic, and partnership for all elements of PPPs into everyday CSR projects? Odunayo, from your perspective, how can CSR evolve from just charity to a strategic tool that amplifies PPPs for nation building?
Thank you very much, Buki. I think it really starts from our mindset. And at the MTN Foundation, we describe it as CSI, and that's corporate social investment. Charity is it smirks of, something that is given and people just walk away. But when we begin to see whether as, the government, as public sector or private sector or private individuals, we see those activities as investments and not just charity work, then we're headed somewhere. And then when you see something as an investment, chances are that you begin to look beyond the immediate impact of what you're doing, and you see a wider scope and how to pull in, multiple stakeholders into what is being done. So, having said that, coming back to your question, I think that we will continue to need the ad hoc investments. However, we must begin to see the possibilities of, the bigger public-private sector partnerships, because those are what can help us scale various sectors. And I'll just give you, an example. Some time ago, MTN, now as MTN, we keyed into the road infrastructure tax credit scheme. And what that has done is you see huge funding going into catalytic funding, going into infrastructure that benefits the entire nation. Not every organization or individual can key in at that top level, but it's very important that even as we go on within the smaller CSI activities, we must see that there's a bigger stakeholder ecosystem. And if only we came to this, then our 1 + 1 becomes 10. And that's what partnerships, do. Government brings a lot to the table, from policy, to frameworks and all of that. And of course, the private sector brings a lot, from our competencies to efficiencies and all of that. And then we key into it. So yes, PPPs will surely amplify nation building. And at the foundation, we have found this to be true. It's made us more efficient, especially when, I'll give an example of our healthcare initiatives, because I think it's important to, back this with examples so that it's not just theoretical. We do a lot with primary healthcare, and we could have gone on ahead to say, we want to build our own primary healthcare centers. We want to build small clinics in the rural areas. But I think that for us, would just have been a waste of limited resources. And so what we do is that we partner with the primary healthcare development agency that already exists, and then we work together with them to make a number of primary healthcare centers functional, as against reinventing the wheel. So yes, PPPs will amplify nation building, whether in education, in healthcare, in social enterprise, and it will also, enable us to be a bit more efficient with whether private or public sector resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Odunayo. Some really crucial points that you have mentioned there. I think as you were speaking, I just thought, there's so many organizations that are still handling, CSR as a medium to give back, more like charity, whereas you've clearly, using various examples to identify, to show us how MTN actually looks at it more as an investment, so corporate social investments. You also talked about the need to be strategic about aligning with, the critical stakeholders in the ecosystem, be it PPP or governments, because this will only help to create a multiplying effect. It will help to increase impact and, also long-term sustainability. Thank you for that, Odunayo. So reimagining the way CSR is executed holds immense promises for citizens. Kelvin, from a policy perspective, how does the government view this evolving CSR landscape? How do you see it aligning with national development goals and public sector priorities?
Thank you, Buki. From a policy perspective, the government increases sees corporate social responsibility, which also we know as CSRO, not just as charity, because most times we usually want to look at CSROs as just charity or goodwill, but as a strategic tool for sustainable development. The evolving CSRO space, as we see it these days, is shifting towards shared value creation. So it's not just about companies just saying, oh, I have these bits or I budgeted for this particular project and I must carry it out. Those projects must meet national development plans. I've been in situations where, let's say, let me give an example here. A company have already budgeted funds for school, for example. Whereas the location where they stand, you already have 4 schools without teachers. So you building an additional school in that regard, it becomes a challenge. So from the government perspective, CSRO needs to align with national policy. It needs to be strategized, and it also needs to meet subnational priorities. Let's know that globally, for example, there's this move towards environmental, social, and governance, that's ESG, right? Standards and stakeholders capitalism, as we call it today. Multifunctional as expected to integrate the CSRO, how they operate and impact communities. So now CSRO's most impact is not just about feel it or I just want to do something for the community without having any impact. Locally, governments are realizing the need for institutionalizing CSRO. I can tell you this, that a country like India, for example, already have an institutionalized way of carrying out CSRO. While in Edo State, during my tenure, I also came up with incentives for CSR. So, for example, you could get tax breaks just because you are already impacting your immediate community, or you're creating additional jobs just to support the community. Hence, CSRO, as government looks at it, must align with national developmental goals. And I want to say this very quickly, that at the national level, there will be need to do this, but more importantly, subnationals are where the businesses also occur. And my experience showed that most of the subnationals, there's a misalignment in terms of how CSRO is being carried out. More importantly also, the whole idea about job creation, health and educational outcomes in subnationals the CSRO has to align with those plans. And again, in the public sector, when you talk about public sector financing, for example, most times you find out that when they are carrying out CSRO, because they are carrying out CSRO, it is possible that government also is not maybe doing their own part in that regard. So there must be this synergy in terms of the CSRO. In other climates also, they've come up with what I call CSRO registry and dashboard. You must be able to monitor. You must be able to, government will now needs to be able to monitor CSRO's programs that are being carried out and ensuring that there are no duplicates. I heard Odunayo saying, in terms of when you're doing, let's say, a health program, at the end of the day, there's another, company doing same health program. I think that is also very important. Then the CSRO must meet the host community's needs. I think as we go on, we're able to speak more on that. It's very important because we have also seen misalignment when it comes to having communication with communities in that regard. If you ask me, I would say there must be a systematic change in the way we take CSRO. Co-investing in government flagship programs is very important, and scaling innovation like in health, agriculture, or digital finance ultimately would catalyst what I call public value. And again, it will help the entirety in terms of government and the private sector in achieving what I've called a shared goal or shared value. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Lots of nuggets you've shared there. I think one of the things that really stood out for me was CSR must impact. It's not just about ticking the boxes, it must impact. And some of the ways to drive this, which you also mentioned, was CSR needing to align with the national development goals. And also not just looking at it at a national level, but bringing in the subnationals, because that for bringing in the subnationals for overall alignments, but that would also help to increase the impact before we now even start looking at the monitoring and evaluation through some of these best practices in other climes, like the CSR registry that you've shared. Okay, so one word that I've heard from both of you is a critical point, which is that CSR is catalytic. Yeah. So rather than just goodwill measures, or goodwill gestures, it actually has a catalytic effect. Odunayo, your work in MTN Foundation shows how partnerships can transform sectors. What models have you seen succeed in embedding CSR into PPPs to ensure sustainability and community ownership?
Thank you, Buki, and thank you, Kelvin. Permit me to, get into something that Kelvin said, and then I'll segue back into this question. I'm very wary of legislating CSI or CSR. People call it CSR, we call it CSI. It's difficult for you to legislate it. It's a different conversation entirely. And the reason I say that is because this is usually done, whether we like it or not, of goodwill. That's the truth. So it will remain goodwill because companies understand, for instance, at MTN, the MTN Foundation is 20 years old. We're 20 last year. We'll be 21 this year. Almost as old as the main business itself. And the reason for setting up the foundation, and there's a foundation in almost in every of the countries we operate in, about 20 of them across Africa. And we understand and know that we're only as good. Our success as a business is only assured to the level that the communities we operate in are well, their well-being is assured to a level. We know we're not government. We can't do everything. But also government can't do everything. That's why we're talking about CSI, we're talking about philanthropy and, all of that, talking about patient capital, catalytic capital. So I think that if you look around the world, a lot of, so we benchmark and you will see that even in quote, developed countries, as they're referred to, education, health are big ticket items for companies. And it depends on what they now choose to do. So some people want to run a CSI or philanthropy that is clearly aligns with their core business. It's not bad. They're different models. Some other companies like MTN would run the foundation just aligning with global standards through the SDGs, aligning with Nigeria's national priorities, and of course, the impact that the objectives of setting up the foundation. So I think we need to be careful about saying people can't duplicate things. You know what? There are so many schools in Nigeria today that if we all decide to touch all the schools and do education, we might not even finish impacting, those schools. So I just thought it's important not to, curb people or organizations. Let them do what they need to do as long as the impact can be measured. They're measurable, they're qualitative, and all of that. So let me rest that there. Back to the question that you've asked, and I think I've already started answering, that question. Yes, CSI is catalytic capital because it catalyzes change and some form of transformation, whether in the lives of individuals or in the lives of collectives, that's maybe a geographical community. And so for us at the MTN Foundation, the first thing that we do is that transparency is very key for us, and accountability. And so we do have a monitoring and evaluation team who will look through all that is done. And for us, it's about the community. And so there usually is a needs assessment that goes on. We look at the data from all our programs. We look at data from the government, from the Bureau of Statistics. Some people argue they may not be accurate, but that's what we have to work with. And so we work with that data and work with global data. If it's health, we look at the WHO. If it's education, other, global institutions. And layering that on the local data that we have here, we see where we need to intervene. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, we came up with a program we call the What Can We Do Together initiative. And what does it do? We look at national priorities, we look at data from the MBS, and we decide to say, okay, we need to intervene in health, either because we see high disease burdens, or we see data that tells us that people are not doing well when it comes to maybe primary health care and all of that. And so what we do is we open up, we advertise to Nigerians and say that this year the MTN Foundation will like to revitalize X number of primary healthcare centers. Last year, I think we were able to do to complete around 49 out of 52 we had budgeted for. And so the Nigerians then nominate communities that will benefit from the initiative. This is done in partnership with the Federal Ministry of Health, the Primary Healthcare Development Agency. And so people nominate. We get tons of nominations. We prune it down to about we did prune it down to about 300. And we visited about 300 communities to arrive at 50 52 that we were going to revitalize. And we went into those 300 communities, interviewing the people there, the religious leaders, the traditional leaders, the women leaders, the youth leaders, and all of that. And we get, feel their pulse. And they either tell us, yes, this is what we need, or, oh, no, we have a functioning PHC, and so we don't need that here. And then they tell us what they need, which we take back. It may not be in the scope of the current program, but we take it back because we have a bank where we keep all of those for future opportunities. And so we do all of this, and then we get feedback, and then we shortlist the 50. We shortlist the number that we need. Now, once we shortlist, we keep the communities abreast of whatever we're doing, and then we now go to the subnationals, the states. Remember, we've notified the federal ministry, we've notified the federal MPHCDA. We now go, once we've shortlisted for the initiative, we now begin to engage the states. We let the government know, the state government, that's the office of the governor. We let the state Ministry of Health know. We let the state MPHCDA know that we're trying to do this. And so we continue to engage, and we sign a social contract, because part of what we do is we're bringing, we believe that we're bringing something that will transform the community. So they need to own it, because remember, one of the reasons why people don't go in companies, institutions, and even individuals may not want to go into CSI is because they think they're stuck, they can't come out of it. They're stuck in it for life. So the way we run it is that we train those, for instance, in the PHCs. If it's a borehole, we train the community. If it's a school, we tell them what to do to extend the lifespan of the intervention that we're providing. We also know that no intervention lasts a lifetime. You can't give people borehole and think it's going to be there for 100 years. No. So we do solar-powered boreholes. And so in this 52 primary healthcare centers, only one had water. So we had to also provide make provision for 51 solar-powered boreholes, in addition to supplying equipment, enrolling them on the drug revolving scheme, and many other things. The scope, we give them alternative power. And in doing all of this, people are trained. They give us somebody in the community who's trained to take care of the borehole, and the community comes together and they pay the person. And if there's a problem, there's usually like a 2-year warranty period. The contractor goes back to fix those things. So for us, the social contract is extremely important with the communities. And have we had communities who say that's not what they need? Yes. We've had, like I said, people say, look, we have a functional PHC, would rather have this. And we log that for the next intervention and try to see if there's an alignment in the next phase of the intervention. So that's what we do and that's what we've done over the years. For the What Can We Do Together program, we've installed transformers across communities. We've remodeled schools, providing them, with infrastructure, because we don't believe you don't go building, like I said earlier, and Kelvin also said, you don't repeat. If that already exists, you can key into it, except maybe there's a need that needs to be met, and the infrastructure on ground cannot support meeting that need. So for us, the communities are central to what we do, because they must take ownership. In taking ownership, that's the only way we can monitor impact and see how we can do better, even within those communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Odunayo. I felt like you were taking us behind the scenes, felt quite privileged to be hearing that. And I think our listeners actually that are maybe considering working with MTN will find it also quite useful. Just you detailing what happens behind the scenes, the process, the level of engagements you have to go through, and how strategic those interventions are. I think two things that came out for me was data and sustainability, how that is very deeply woven into everything you're doing. You talked about, a needs assessment and the importance of using the data that exists. Yes, it might not be completely accurate, but that's what exists. And then, but also mixing this with community engagement, government stakeholder engagement, and all the other critical stakeholders that have to be engaged. Also, the second point that also jumped out for me was in terms of promoting sustainability through the social contracts that are signed within the communities. Okay, now to the heart of our conversation, the intersection. CSR and PPPs are often treated as separate approaches, but their overlap offers powerful opportunities. Kelvin, how do you see these two frameworks complementing each other? Are there examples where a CSR initiative matured into a PPP or vice versa? Perhaps you could speak to how CSR can act as a soft infrastructure enabler for hard infrastructure PPPs, or how it helps build a social license to operate for businesses, which is crucial for large-scale public projects.
Oh, thank you, Buki. Absolutely. This is where the real strategy potential lies. The intersection of corporate social responsibility and public-private partnership. That is one of the most underutilized yet high impact strength in terms of development. In my opinion, I believe that we are not actually utilizing that intersection very well. But traditionally seen, you know how it is seen. The corporate social responsibility is seen as voluntary, like we've heard, and philanthropic. And PPP as very conceptual, I would call it, and infrastructure driven in most cases. And again, people view, I'll call it, like you said, CSRO soft infrastructure, PPP hard infrastructure. Once you start to talk about PPP, then that means that you are getting very serious. But really, I would say CSRO creates that foundation for PPP to actually strive. If you are going to look at the complementarity of both the CSRO and PPP, I would say, for example, the CSRO brings about the community trust, that's building trust in the community. It brings about institutional goodwill. I'll give you a very critical example. With PPP, with corporate social responsibility, you are able to build that trust first with the community. There was what we were practicing as what we call proud and informed consent. What it means is that even as a business, you couldn't go into a community without first informing the community. I'll use a clear example during our oil palm program, which was largely successful. The data was first created through corporate social responsibility. The stakeholder engagements with the communities were done with donor partners and corporate social responsibilities. Existing oil palm companies saw the need that they needed to be able to have data from the existing programs that were going on. At the same time, inform the communities that new projects and programs will be coming up. And that built that trust that at the time we're getting about 12 investors to come into those locations. They were already sold. The communities were already happy. Definitely, there were one or two areas where communities wanted clarification. But the existing conversation with corporate social responsibility. So, for example, if you already had, let's say, a company that is doing very well in a particular location, coming up with what is needed by the community, supporting the community, it's only logical that they would see that once another company comes, they will do likewise. And that builds that trust. So PPP, yes, creates that soft infrastructure, brings about case studies. For example, we're able to use PPPs, corporate social responsibility, as provide those case studies, use it for data collection, and use it for community building. So all those stakeholder engagements are done, in collaboration with corporate social responsibility, donor partnership, and government involvement. Very important. What it does is that any investor or business that want to come into such location, they don't need to start from scratch, because they already have data to work with and the trust has already been built. So this is very key. More importantly, also, when you look at PPP, is that let me use a clinic, for example. If, let me say, the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation supported to build some clinics in Edo State at some point. Now, in doing that, for example, for sustainability of those clinics, you cannot switch. That would have been like a donation or corporate social responsibility, but again, at that particular point in time, for sustainability of that particular clinic, for example, you cannot switch it to PPP, where you bring a private consultant that will be able to manage the place, collaborating with government. And at the end of the day, that particular donation has created a foundation for a PPP to exist. That also comes with when we are looking at energy, for example. At the time we were wanting to create the energy bill, that's what I call the electricity bill, you needed to do what we call an energy market feasibility. That feasibility was done in collaboration as a corporate social responsibility with an energy company then, Osiomo in Edo State. And that created that foundational ground to build on top in terms of, and that was why at that particular point, Edo State was one of the first states that came up with the electricity bill 2 weeks after the federal government passed their own bill. Where at the time the federal government passed the bill, we needed to go back to repeal the bill so that into law now, to now harmonize with the federal law on electricity for subnationals. So you can see how just using corporate social responsibility, you are already touching lives, and it creates that initial foundation where we can now build the hardcore in terms of roads, doing PPP, getting roads done with PPP projects, getting huge infrastructures done with PPP projects. Also, the corporate social responsibility can also support with monitoring, grievance redress, and all of that. So for me, it's very key in terms of when you talk about corporate social responsibility as the soft infrastructure. I would say it actually creates that leeway for PPP to now happen in such a location. So I want to strongly advocate that there's the need for that intersection between corporate social responsibility and public-private partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. And yes, thank you for sharing those examples. And I think that the point you made about CSR helps to build trust, which has to be built in these communities that we're, planning to serve. So that trust element is so important. Almost nothing happens, if the trust isn't there. So CSR helps to build trust. Seeing it as a foundation or as an open pathway for PPP to then come in. But thank you for sharing those examples. Okay, so both CSR and PPPs face real implementation challenges. Odunayo, what are some of the unique challenges the private sector faces when trying to work with the government, such as the lack of a comprehensive legal and regulatory framework for CSR, economic instability, limited stakeholder engagement, or even a focus on profit-driven CSR that can lead to greenwashing? What has helped MTN overcome this?
Thank you, Buki, for that question. I like what Kelvin said, layering CSR or CSI as the foundation, and then for the hardcore PPPs to be built on it, like a superstructure type of arrangement. I would also like to add that at times, the CSI may not get to the level where the PPPs get built, on it. But it's the heavy lifting. The initial heavy lifting is done, and then possibly maybe handed over back to the public sector, or like Kelvin said, another model evolves where it can now become a bit commercialized and it's a bit more sustainable. For us at the foundation, we believe that the government is a very important partner, not only at the foundation and at MTN. Infrastructure, the largest infrastructure is owned by the government. Government is the largest, highest spender, and all of that. Policy is the turf of the government. And so we are clear that it's important to work with government. Now, when you look at PPPs generally, and when I say government, I mean the public sector. When you look at PPPs, one of the problems that is the lack of trust. Either the public sector doesn't trust the private sector, or the private sector, has a preconceived notion and doesn't trust the public sector. Accountability can be a problem. But I think all of this can be worked on if we agree, at the starting point as to what we want to achieve. We all bring different interests to the table. Our outcomes that we want may be different. But at the end of the day, if we both sit to look at it, then we can all see that regardless of what we need or what we want, it's all about creating shared prosperity and, a shared value for the people and the communities that we operate in. So for us, we see government as a very important partner. And like I said, it's about public sector and private sector coming together. Now, if we do not work together, then we will not know how to overcome some of these barriers that we have built or that, maybe rightfully so. The public sector has its own perception, the private sector has its own perception. But we have worked with certain government organizations that really they do have, some of them have the private sector mindset. But yes, they're government. And yes, we've had times where things didn't go, as planned. The private sector wants things, we just run. Once you get something, you're running with it. It may not be so with government. There's a lot of bureaucracy, whether we like it or not. So I think it's in understanding those and engaging with the public sector stakeholders. So for us, we engage, continuously and continually. And this is maybe not only when we have a program that impacts them. We call them in for even the things that we're doing that doesn't have a public sector leg, for them to see how these things are working out. We are the telecoms industry is quite regulated, but I think it's important that we have policies around CSI and enabling policies that make it attractive for organizations and even individuals to, and I think Kelvin had mentioned a few of them. Those policies at national level, I'm happy that Edo State has that, but how many more states can we get, to have such policies? So the policies act as a magnet. If there's enabling policies, enabling environment. But I think one thing that we're not even saying here, beyond the challenges of the PPPs, is even the challenges with local communities. What we've seen is that even with the local communities, there's a lot that needs to be done. So you will see communities that don't really want to take ownership because they see it's CSI, it's charity, like you say, and they tell us to our faces, MTN Foundation has come. Now, in another month, we're going to see Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation come. In another month, we're going to see. So the sense of responsibility is not there. We've seen some of this. And so those are some of for me, the communities is where we've had most of our challenges, where we have to speak to them, engage them, pull them together almost in a parliament, and try to almost like sell what you're trying to do for them. And if care is not taken, the mindset to own it necessarily, you have to work on that. But for government has, for us, we've had it as a foundation. I think government opens up to philanthropy, to CSI, but still we have to understand the terms of engagement, because those are some of the things that breed conflict. The terms of engagement, the objectives, the outcomes, all of this must be clear, and the levels of accountability. So that's what I would say. But really, effective and continuous stakeholder engagement and management is also very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Odunayo. And it's interesting that you raised there that, yes, the challenges to overcome do not only exist within governments, but, also exist within the communities itself. And yes, collaboration, stakeholder engagement, collaboration, just to, create that shared prosperity, shared values, and the enabling environment. Okay, thank you, Odunayo. One of the promises of PPPs is attracting private capital for the public good. Kelvin, what are the key ingredients for creating investor confidence in state-led partnerships? How does the government address challenges like weak regulatory frameworks, bureaucratic inefficiencies, or frequent changes in government that can impede PPP success?
Well, thank you, Buki. I will go into briefly where Odunayo stopped when he talks about challenges, because it goes into looking at how we can have effective PPPs in the subnationals or at a national level. You've seen situations where you have two companies and they offer the same services or products, right? And they want to, have a corporate social responsibility in your area or your location. If the political will is not there or government is biased, you will see a situation where only one would have the level playing field to be able to carry such activity. That it's a challenge on its own. Let me just quickly address the issue of communities. Yes, and that is why at the time, my tenure in Edo State, we actually went for several stakeholder engagement to create what we call the free power informed concept. I tell you, Buki, what you observe sometimes is if you cut government away and you go to a community to go do a project, and maybe because you just want to have what I call it for the cameras, or there's a reputational damage you want to try and fix as a company, or you want to carry out your corporate social responsibility, what happens in that regard is that we have seen situations where communities also want to take advantage of companies. So as a government, you're supposed to be that leveler. You're supposed to carry an oversight function where you make sure that the companies are not being extorted by such communities. At the same time, that the companies are not taking advantage of the communities. Most times, the communities don't know what they want. Okay, a company is coming to do mining in your area, for example, right? And they're going to be creating a lot of, let's say, distortion on health and all of that. And they come and give you, let's say, they will take 2 of your people as employees. And that is what they are going to do for the entire community. And the community now confirms that at the end of the day, this company is making billions out of that particular community. The youth get infuriated. But if there was a strategic policy drive to ensure that there is a standing documentation, how you enter into that community, what is expected of the companies. Companies are not expected to do government. They are critical duties of government that we cannot relegate to companies or private sector. It cannot be done. They are only just coming as buffer, and it should be seen that way. So speaking about that also, you would see a situation where you find out that communities are not happy because at the end of the day, like I said, you come for the cameras, you did a borehole. Let me go with what Odunayo said. You did a borehole. You don't expect the borehole to last forever. We agree. But after 1 month, the borehole stops working. And the community, you have taken all the paparazzi pictures. They are all happy, thinking that they will get water at least for the next 12 months. but in 30 days, they don't have water. So that is a challenge, a major challenge. Now, going back to your question, I want to say one of the critical in terms of attracting investment using PPP is trust. Once there is no trust, we always say money goes to where money is invited. Funds cannot go to where it is rejected. And what I mean, the quickest way to reject funds is mistrust and policy somersault. Businesses want to know that there is policy predictability, as in they can predict a policy. So it is very important. Trust is very important. And again, I will reiterate, political will. Once the government of the day is not interested in projects, I've seen situations, and I would say this not necessarily, though I've been privileged to work with certain subnationals, but you find a situation where some don't even want PPP. They don't want PPP. They want to just spend from government coffers because it's easier that way. You don't do that. At the end of the day, you find out that they don't go with the PPP framework. Framework is very important because money is not about talk. We want to see documentation. So an investor naturally want to see your documentation, your laws. What are your PPP laws? What is guiding the investor that today, if you act contrary to our agreements, our terms, what will I hold you onto? So these are very important frameworks that subnationals need to have. Once they have that, you would see a natural drive into the PPP. For example, when we did the Azura, for example, in Edo State, it was one of those that really want to, understand PPP in Nigeria. Go look into Azura. You would see how it was very tight. If it wasn't tight, the investors by now would have gone bankrupt. And don't say what you don't mean. We are very used to it. I'm not longer in government though, but we are very used to it in government. Once the cameras are there, we say things we cannot do. At the end of the day, the investor holds you to those commitments, what we call gentleman agreements. We're sending the certain subnationals at the end of the day. So it's very important that trust, political will, and don't say what you cannot do. I think I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. I really wish we had more time for you to share and unpack more of the stories that, you were obviously in close proximity to, just based on your roles and the work you've done. So, no, thanks for sharing that. And yes, political will, so important. It's when we talk about these challenges, once there is political will, the challenges almost don't exist. You also mentioned strategic policy making, and this is important. So not waiting to address the issues, but looking ahead and seeing what could those issues be and how do we mitigate them, and also incorporate it as we're making these policies. And then of course, trust again. So you talked about trust and policy predictability, which really is just, that's enabling regulatory environments. Thanks very much for sharing that, Kelvin. So looking forward now, Kelvin, if you could propose one policy reform or institutional mechanism to strengthen PPP implementation nationwide, what would it be?
I would say, Buki, that we all subnationals needs to have a PPP framework. We're good enough. We currently, we have the World Bank looking into that in conjunction with the PEBEC, that's Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. And I do know that the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is also looking at the ICRC. But beyond that, you find out that sometimes you have good policies, implementation. So we need to be held accountable when it comes to implementation. How we can do that also, it's at a national framework. So we don't have subnationals, for example, getting into contractual agreements that they don't intend to keep. So we need to have that framework that sort of gives the investor confidence when they are coming into particular regions. And most importantly, data. One of the challenges why you find some of these PPP do fail also is that when they are coming into play, there's no data. Then talking about corporate social responsibility, we need to have a CSRO framework. I don't want to call it a law because I know private sectors are always very scared. They feel that they're already carrying too many burdens in terms of taxation and in terms of other sort of requests that government makes to them. But there should be a workable framework. And the Office of Philanthropy, if you ask me, can catalyze that sort of framework, and we will be happy to support in that regards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. I think that was a clear call to action. So thanks for sharing. We do need a framework, you've said, and you've shared the ministries, departments, and agencies that either are interested or should be interested, and the call to action to the philanthropy office as well. Thank you, Kelvin. Odunayo, for companies looking to deepen their CSR strategy and align it with national development goals, what are 2 to 3 best practices you would recommend? Perhaps either focusing on leveraging data-driven insights for impact measurement or embedding CSR into organizational structure.
Thank you very much, Buki, and thank you, Kelvin, for that great response. So for me, I would say that this is now not the 2 to 3 best practices, but I think I would like to say that companies should understand that, CSI is, it's something that goes beyond greenwashing. I think, rather than do it for the purpose of greenwashing, then you don't do it at all. Because it will show through and, the intentions will be clear. So for companies who really want to deepen their CSI strategy, I will say the first thing is for them to have clarity around the thematic areas that they would want to intervene in. And the reason is because so that they don't become, what do they say, is it jack of all trades, master of none, where you do everything. You can't do everything. For impact, you need to focus. So it's important for clarity around the thematic areas that the various institutions, organizations, or even individuals want to intervene in. And this, of course, is made easier when we make use of data, available data. At times, people go into interventions because of lived experiences. Whatever it is, you must have clarity around the thematic areas that you want to go into and where you will not, be found investing in, because that clarity is very important. I think that's number 1. I think number 2 is to also be familiar with the national development plan of, for instance, Nigeria. What is the government trying to achieve in the next 5, 10, 15 years? What role can you play? Of course, aligning this also through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. And good enough, I think goal 17 of the 17th goal, the last goal, is about partnership for the goals. So it's important for organizations and institutions to have a view around what the national development plan of the country is at any point in time, and of course aligning with the SDGs. And I think the last thing for me will be around data monitoring and evaluation. It's important that all that we do is informed by data. So for us at the foundation, we have 3 key thematic areas. We have youth development. We have capacity building, under which there's youth development. We have health, and we have economic empowerment. All the programs that we run under these 3 pillars are informed by, they're data-driven. Whether it's a female entrepreneurship program, whether it is the scholarship program, all data-driven. So data is very important, and we must also continue to get data from the communities that we want to engage, from government. And M&E, very important, monitoring and evaluation. After you're done, how do you monitor? and evaluate the impact of what you've done. Now, the reason why that is important is it helps you to know whether you're, to be able to course correct in the event that things are not going as planned. If you see you're not going to get the impact that you really have set out, you can identify the reasons why through M&E and be able to, tweak the strategy again. So these are some of the things. And also, the last thing I would say is that there's no CSI without the community. There's just no CSI without the community. We must continuously engage our communities, local communities. I think till date, we've impacted almost 4,000 communities pan-Nigeria. Of course, we've worked in the 36 states and the FCT. And over 500 local government areas. But we find also that engaging communities, we can't sit in Lagos and think we can impact a community in Zamfara. You have to be on ground. You have to be there and engage with the people. So those are the 4 things actually that I would speak to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Odunayo. So yes, I picked up clarity on focus areas, not just jumping left and right with your strategic focus. You talked about national development plans, aligning to that national development plan, but also incorporating, sustainable development goals. You also talked about data, so even shared examples of using data to inform, the decisions and the focus areas, and the importance of monitoring and evaluation. You gave us a bonus point with community engagements, the importance of community engagements, and really having those boots on ground. As we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts. What gives you hope about the future of partnerships in Nigeria, and what role do you see CSR and PPPs playing in that future? So Kelvin, if you can just spend a couple of minutes telling us, what gives you hope about the future of partnerships in Nigeria, and what role do you see CSR and PPPs playing in that future?
Thank you, Buki. For me, really, the CSR and PPP, when deployed together, can bridge Nigerian infrastructure gap, reduce inequality, and rewire our economy for inclusive growth. But for us to achieve this, I must say that there is need for us to have risk mitigants in terms of our public-private partnership. What I'm saying in essence is that we now need to really be very serious about public-private partnership in terms of having scorecards, ensuring that it can even be with the ICRC, where they have a delivery unit that have a dashboard that looks at all the PPPs, harmonize them across subnationals. So if a project has said, we're going to spend 12 or 18 months to deliver this project, once there's a delay, it's like having the lights where you have amber, red, and green. You'll be able to know exactly, okay, this is exactly where we are. Then we also have to look at our fiscal policy and legal risk management protocols. The protocols have to just be there. Clear mechanism for managing contingent liability, our FX risk, and dispute resolution. Challenges sometimes are those resolutions. So yes, PPP and corporate social responsibility can bridge the infrastructure gap in Nigeria. I would say that this very important thing also is institutional trust is the new currency of investment. If we can build institutions that outlast administrations, we'll build partnerships that outlast challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. Odunayo?
Well, thank you, Bukia. I think for me, it is CSI and PPPs, just like Kelvin said, is very key to our next phase as a nation. We're playing catch up virtually in all areas as a nation. So how do we leapfrog? Is by coming together, by bringing all the resources we have together, whether in the ideas, the innovations, just bringing everything together and working together. So I totally agree 100%, maybe 120%, that CSI and PPPs will enable us to leapfrog as a nation. However, some things still create, should I say, like a crack, and we're not yet there. And we have to fix those things. And one clear thing, for instance, will be, Kelvin has spoken to the frameworks, I won't repeat that, will be for us to strengthen our institutions, especially our public institutions. We have to strengthen it across, because that's the attraction. Whether we're trying to attract foreign direct investment or we want, partnership with private sector within the country, there has to be something that attracts. And it will be that our institutions are indeed, our public sector institutions are strong rather than ailing as we have, them today. And I think for me, it will birth infrastructure growth. It will up our human development index. Because when PPPs happen, there's usually opportunities for individuals, whether in education, in health, just in social enterprises. This is what we're going to see. So for me, I am hopeful that it's something we can do if we're able to address certain challenges that make it unattractive. And I'll say it again, Kelvin also has said it, and I've also mentioned it, the issue of trust and accountability has, these two have to be dealt with decisively so that there's an enabling environment where it becomes almost the nature of both public and private sector to partner with each other, because then we can achieve scale. So I'm hopeful, but we just have a lot of work to do. And once we're able to do the work, then we begin to see the results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Odunayo. Okay, so this has been an incredibly rich and enlightening conversation. We've heard how purposeful partnerships can unlock shared value, not just between sectors, but between citizens and systems. At the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation, we believe in building bridges between ideas, institutions, and individuals to create a public sector that is capable, collaborative, and citizen-focused. Odunayo and Kelvin, thank you very much for your time, the valuable insights you've shared, and also sharing your lived examples in your respective industries and your commitment to making partnerships work for the greater good. To our listeners, we hope today's episode has inspired new thinking and perhaps new collaborations. Stay tuned for more stories of innovation and reform on the Aig-Imoukhuede Foundation podcast. Until next time, let's keep working together to build a Nigeria that works for all. Thank you very much.